Hello, everyone. This is the seventh class for social psychological perspectives on health. So after we will be done with this class, we are halfway done. So I hope you have been enjoying this class, this course, and also I hope that you will enjoy the rest of the class. So in today's lecture, in the last lecture, I talked about how disadvantaged people may have a barrier to successful social identity change. So in the life transitions, low status group people tend to have barriers to develop new social identity. And one of the reasons behind that such barrier is that low status group people tend to experience incompatibility between their old identities and new identities. And this is especially true when the life transitions involve upward mobility, upward change. Like, for example, when a child in a low status family gets into a university, and then if this is the first time for their family to send their children to the university, then this child will experience the incompatibility between the old identity and between old identity and new identity. This is because within the old identity group, nobody has been to universities, and then there is no norm of studying at university in their family or relatives. And in new identity group, most of the children have their parents who have been to universities. And then maybe there's a different cultures between their families and relatives and their friends at universities. And they may feel that, okay, maybe I do not really belong to this new group, or maybe I have nothing to share with these new friends at the university. And then it will make these people's well-being lower, and then also it makes these people more likely to drop out from the university. And today I will talk more of those examples using, say, some previous studies. So two passes of identity negotiation in the case of Hispanic students in the US. And this study was conducted by I'm not sure how to pronounce, but Ethier and Duex, yes, in 1994. And this study, I actually talked in I think it was chapter 1, maybe, or maybe chapter 2, actually. So I talked about hypothesis 3, the group circumstance hypothesis, when and to the extent that a person defines themselves in terms of a given social identity, their well-being will be affected by the state and circumstances of the group with which that identity is associated. So if the identity is associated with a low status group, then their well-being will be affected by such status or state and the circumstances. So in the study done by Ethier and Duex, they found that well-being of Hispanic students fell once they entered universities. And however, highly identified individuals engage more in cultural activities and restore positive identity. So this study shows that depending on how strongly people identify with their Hispanic culture, their well-being after entering universities would be different. So let's look at in detail how that would be different. So when people have lower initial ethnic identification, and then they are likely to have low university identification. So the initial ethnic identification, this is more like individual difference. Okay. This is more like individual difference. And then lower university identification, this is somewhat prevalent among low status group people. And this is because those who belong to low status groups would perceive incompatibilities between their old identities or like initial identities and new identities like university student. And when these two identification are present, then this will lead to even lower ethnic identification, and this would in turn lead to lower self-esteem. So if I draw some boxes, so here, let me type in. So low, okay, let's do this. Ethnic identification time 1. Sorry. Let's do again. So low, ethnic identification time 1. And university identification time 1. Okay. And ethnic identification time 2. And finally, we have well-being, the dependent variable here. Okay. And this doesn't work. Okay. So ethnic identification, initial ethnic identification, and the university identification at time 1 affect ethnic identification at time 2. And this ethnic identification at time 2 would affect well-being at maybe time 2 or time 3. So what these researchers found was that low ethnic identification at time 1 is positively related to ethnic identification at time 2, meaning that lower ethnic identification group would have lower ethnic identification at time 2. Similarly, university identification at time 1 is positively related to ethnic identification at time 2. So low university identification people would have low ethnic identification at time 2. And the levels of identification at time 2 is positively again related to the well-being. So low ethnic identification at time 2, people with low ethnic identification at time 2 would have lower well-being at time 2 or possibly time 3. So yeah, this is what they found. And on contrary, higher initial ethnic identification, they engaged in ethnic activities at university, and they established continuity between their past and present identities, and then even stronger ethnic identification at the end of the first year. So unlike those who have lower initial ethnic identification, okay, so let's think about lower ethnic identification people again. So those who do not really belong to, those who do not really identify with their Spanish identities, Hispanic identities, then when they enter universities, they found that, okay, maybe Hispanic culture is not really the mainstream of the life in university. And the mainstream would be more like white American culture, maybe. And because they do not identify with Hispanic culture, they do not express their Hispanic identities at university. And also because they come from relatively lower status group, they perceive the incompatibility between what they used to have when they were in high school and then what they found at university. So they perceive such incompatibility between the past and present identities, and thus their university new identification would be lower as well. And this would lead to lower ethnic identification. I mean, yeah, further lower ethnic identification time too, and then lower self-esteem. But people who have high ethnic identification, they strongly identify with this Hispanic culture. And then because of that, when they enter universities, they engage in ethnic activities at university. So for example, maybe they belong to like Hispanic culture club, and then they express their Hispanic identities, or they maybe present like Hispanic related, maybe, I don't know, dance or paintings, or I don't know, I'm not really familiar with what would be the typical Hispanic cultures, but basically they express and engage in these ethnic activities and present to other students at university who they are, you know. And by doing that, before entering university, they had strong Hispanic identities. And because they can still express such Hispanic identities at university, they can feel continuity between their past and present identities. Before entering university, they were Hispanic people. And after entering university, they can say that they are still Hispanic people. They can still feel free to express their Hispanic culture, maybe wear just like other Hispanic people. And this continuity would contribute to even stronger ethnic identification at time two, and this would lead to higher well-being. Okay. So maybe you could add one more block here. Engagement, cultural engagement, maybe. Excuse me. Sorry. Ethnic. Let's go in. Ethnic activity engagement. Okay. And then so those who have high ethnic identification tend to engage in ethnic activities more. So the levels of ethnic identification is positively related to the levels of ethnic activity engagement. And the levels of ethnic activity engagement is also positively related to ethnic identity at time too. And this would lead to higher well-being. Okay, so the social determinants of health suggests that gaining education is a good investment. So we have known that there is a health gradient. So the higher their status is, the better their health is. You know? And then one way to improve their status is to receive good education. Sorry. However, excuse me. However, some people, especially low status group people, see the new identity as incompatible with their old one. And when they perceive such incompatibility, receiving benefits of gaining education is more difficult. And these people who perceive the incompatibility is the one who needs the education most, because they are typically in the low status group, and then to improve their status is to receive education. And then, but as you can see, not just because they cannot have education, but also even if they could have education, obtaining benefits out of the education they received is actually even more difficult for those people. Okay, another topic, cognitive alternatives. The awareness that existing social reality is not the only possible one, and that alternatives to it are conceivable and perhaps attainable. This awareness can be termed as cognitive alternatives. So, you can say that the alternative way of thinking is cognitive alternatives. And such awareness gives a sense of the anticipation that a status change for the group, for the whole group is possible. And this kind of awareness is particularly positive for low status group. And then these cognitive alternatives can be contrasted with individual mobility. So individual mobility refers to a strategy that individuals cross group boundaries as individuals and leaves their low status group behind and joins a higher status group. So this was the individual mobility. We have learned this in the several previous lectures. And when they have such awareness of the cognitive alternatives, they are more likely to perceive changes to the social structural context. Or maybe I think this is more like a mutual influence. So when they perceive changes to social structure context, this will give them such awareness. And also when they have such awareness, they are more likely to perceive changes to the social structure context. So I think this is more like mutual. And when they have such awareness, they are more likely to focus on their group's future rather than an individual's personal future. So in the textbook, there's one study introduced showing that among children in a rural area of China, those who perceived higher cognitive alternatives reported higher self-esteem. So I think it's really important that you may want to contrast this effect of cognitive alternatives with the effect of individual mobility. So individual mobility was that basically, when people use the strategy of individual mobility, they leave their old identity. They leave their old group, and thus they would lose one identity, as well as they would lose the source of social support. And then when they enter a new group, they may have a trouble of identifying with their new group. And then also they may not be well accepted by the members of a new group, and thus they may not receive good enough social support from those members of the new group. So individual mobility, like one example of such individual mobility is entering universities, but this way of improving their social status may not be always beneficial for low status group. However, when people could have high cognitive alternatives, then this means that unlike individual mobility, cognitive alternatives is the awareness that collective mobility is possible. So they can improve the status of their group without leaving their group. And because they do not need to leave their group, they can maintain the self-continuity, and they can also enjoy the improved status of their group. Okay, so unlike individual mobility, I think there's a lot of good aspects about these cognitive alternatives or collective mobility. Okay, so we have been talked about barriers to successful social identity change in education context, and then just a belief, but let's look at some other contexts. Housing context. So homeless people have fewer social connections and fewer opportunities to develop new group memberships. So basically, as I have said before, low status people do not have enough material resources to belong to more groups. And then, when you meet friends or when you go out with your friends, you literally need money, right? And then, of course, homeless people do not have money to spend on leisure activities. And thus, they cannot really have or maintain social connections, and they do not have enough opportunities to develop new group membership. And these fewer social connections and fewer opportunities to belong to new group means that they have less bonding capital. And because they have less bonding capital, they have less bridging capital. So for those who do not remember what the bonding capital and bridging capital, let's quickly review what they were. So bonding capital reflects trust and social cohesion, or interaction close ties between individuals. So this is somewhat similar to shared social identity. And bridging capital refers to the ability of an individual to take on new group memberships and or their ability to maintain their membership in important groups. And then past research have shown that more bonding capital leads to more bonding and bridging capital. So let's say this blue person has only one friend. So you could say that he or she, his or her bonding capital is 1. And this person has 3 friends. So, well, you don't really say 1 bonding or 2 bonding capital, but to make things easy here, I would just say this person has 1 bonding capital, and this person, let's say A and B, person B has 3 bonding capitals. And when person A has only 1 bonding capital, their bridging capital may be limited because this person can maintain only the bond with this person and possibly expand his or her bonding capital to 2 persons only. So you could say that person A's bridging capital is limited. In contrast, person B can maintain their bond with 3 people. So this means that like this person B's bridging capital is much bigger than person A. And then furthermore, because this person B has 3 friends and each his or her friend has 2 more friends, this means that person B could expand his or her bonding capital to 6 additional people. So you could say that person B's bridging capital is much higher than person A. So these were the bridging and bonding capital. And here. So homeless people tend to have less bonding capital and there's less bridging capital. And then homeless people could identify with the service that provides shelter. And then this identification with the service predict transition to secure housing. So if they can strongly identify with the service like shelter, then they are more likely to secure their own housing. Just whether staying at the shelter or not is not a strong predictor of whether they would secure housing in the future. However, whether they strongly identify with the shelter or not actually predict whether they would secure their own housing in the future. However, shelters could develop negative social relationships which connect homeless to drug use or criminal activities. So shelters may not have benefits always. And building on support from positive groups while distancing from negative groups is important. So housing would kind of determine to what kind of people they may have contact. And this would further influence how their future behavior would be. Another context is community context. And there is a study done in the indigenous communities in North America. And what they found was 90% of suicide occurred in only 12% of the communities. And no suicide for 5 years in about half of 111 communities studied. So in North America, the high rate of suicide in indigenous community is a social problem. But what the study found was that such high rate of suicide actually only occurred in only the 12% of the communities. And what they found was that a sense of collective community matters. So when the community participate in land claims or self-governance or establishment of cultural facilities, community control over education, then they can maintain the collective continuity. So because indigenous communities are always facing the problems of sort of culture washed by the North American culture. However, when the communities actively participate in these activities or actively participate in these like land claims and self-governance and so on, then they can establish or maintain collective community. And when people could experience collective community in their group, they can experience higher self-esteem and better well-being. And in these high collective continuity communities, people actually do not commit suicide. So how community actually involves with activities to collective continuity help people in the community to stay healthy. Okay, so I think I will just stop here, and in the second video, let's look at the conclusion and then move on to chapter 5.